to really encourage you to download my paper. It is uploaded. It's second from the bottom, so keep scrolling. My name is Jonathan Campbell. Look for that paper, because I am going to be talking about manuscripts, and I find it's much more useful to see the pictures. I've put pictures throughout my paper of the manuscripts I'll be talking about, and so I think you'll get a lot more out of it if you can see what I'm talking about, if you can see the writing and things like that. So I really do encourage you, go to the ASRS website, password is ASRS 2024. Scroll down, second to the bottom, my name is Jonathan Campbell. Download that, I think you'll get more out of it if you do. Holy or profane? Scribal sanctification in Greek New Testament manuscripts. The phenomenon of nomina sacra is one of the defining features of Christian manuscripts. This practice of abbreviating sacred names is evident in Greek, Latin, and Coptic manuscripts from the earliest recovered stages of transmission. Perhaps borrowing from the Jewish practice of writing the Tetragrammaton in different script, scribes from at least the 2nd century nearly always abbreviate Theos, God, Jesus, Jesus, Kurios, Lord, and Christos, Christ. Many studies over the last 50 years have concluded that, in the earliest witnesses extant today, these 4 words are consistently abbreviated. In the image below, we see a passage from P66, a 3rd century manuscript of John's Gospel. This is a zoomed-in view of the final clause of John 1:1, Theos ein ha logos, the Word was God. Notice that Theos has been abbreviated as a theta and sigma with a supralinear bar. So if you've done what I told you to do and download the manuscript, on the second visible line, far on the left, you see a theta. You see what looks like a C, which is a sigma with a bar over it. That is a nomina sacra. That is the abbreviation for Theos. A larger group of words were less likely to be abbreviated in the first centuries of the Christian era, but were adopted into the nomina sacra as time passed. These words included anthropos, David, Jerusalem, Israel, Meter, Uranos, Pater, Pneuma, Stauros, Soter, and Theos. It will be observed that many of these secondary words are, or can be, somewhat ambiguous. Son could refer to Jesus, the Son of Man or Son of God, but it could also refer to Simon, son of John. Heaven could refer to God's dwelling, or simply the dwelling place of the birds. As the name implies, nomina sacra abbreviations were a way to distinguish the divine from the profane. Because of the multivariance of these words, scribes would need to decide when to abbreviate and when to write in full. A scribe would have to decide whether, in each context, the word warranted sanctification by abbreviation. Now, for the purposes of time, I'm going to skip down a little bit. The next couple of paragraphs talk about the fact that some manuscripts always abbreviate no matter what. Some manuscripts never do. But then there's some that are in the middle that do seem to be differentiating between the sacred instances of the word versus the profane instances of the word. And so it's that group that we're going to be focusing on, because that's where the interest is. That's where the scribes are making these decisions. And so I'm skipping to page 4, the second paragraph on page 4. The aim of this paper is to illustrate how the manuscript tradition, attested by our extant Greek New Testament manuscripts, informs our understanding of how the Holy Spirit was perceived throughout Christian history. Because of the multivariance of pneuma, or pneuma, there are many verses where it is debatable whether the author is referring to the 3rd member of the Trinity. In writing the nomina sacra, scribes, wittingly or unwittingly, served as theologians by producing a medium whose very formation identifies divinity. What glimpses of the triune God can be seen in these sanctified abbreviations? Spirit versus spirit, uppercase versus lowercase. I begin with a few ambiguous verses that resulted in a split among the manuscript tradition. It was rare for scribes to abbreviate pneuma when the word was plural or modified by adjectives like unclean or evil, because these clearly referred to demonic spirits. However, pneuma could refer to the source and seat of insight, a spiritual state or disposition, and I take those definitions from BDAG. Further questions about the referent of pneuma comes when the phrase Spirit of Christ or Spirit of the Lord appears. Is this referring to the Holy Spirit or the interiority of Jesus? Through generations of copying, scribes passed verdicts on these and other passages regarding the divinity of each pneuma. John 3 is a useful test case in pneumatological abbreviation because of the way Jesus plays with the meaning of the term throughout his discourse with Nicodemus. In John 6:3, Jesus says, "The one born of the Spirit is Spirit." The first Spirit refers to the Holy Spirit, and the second is qualitative, describing the new life for those born again. I should note that for many scribes, especially later scribes, the tendency was to abbreviate in all instances. They didn't differentiate. For this paper, I am not searching for unanimity of attestation. Rather, it is noteworthy when manuscripts that normally do abbreviate chose not to, as is the case with several manuscripts in John 3:6b. Below are two examples of scribes abbreviating the first pneuma and writing the second pneuma plane, or full form. I suggest that this shows a scribal awareness of context and theology. It would be incorrect to say that those born of the Holy Spirit are themselves the Holy Spirit. So some scribes, including the ones who copied these manuscripts from the 8th and 9th centuries respectively, chose to make the distinction obvious through the visual presentation of the text. And so on page 5 you can see from Codex Basilensis, which is an 8th century manuscript, second line halfway through you see Pi Nu Sigma abbreviated, and the very next word is pneuma written out in full. And the same thing, Codex Cyprius, a 9th century manuscript, same thing, second line, about halfway through, Pi Nu Sigma abbreviated, and then pneuma again in full. I'm going to skip the next paragraph for the sake of time. Going to the bottom paragraph of page 6. Some ambiguous passages are theologically significant. 1 Timothy 3:16 includes a short hymn praising the incarnation and salvation of Jesus. In one of the hymn's lines, we read either that Jesus was justified by the Spirit, as we read in the ESV, the KJV, the NIV, or justified in Spirit, as we read in the ASV and NRSV. The different translations depend on a decision regarding the referent of pneumati. It seems inconsistent to say that it was the Holy Spirit who justified or vindicated Jesus. Yet, it is hard to see what it would mean that Jesus was justified in his Spirit. It is not my wish to exegete 1 Timothy 3:16, but only to point out that the scribes also had difficulty understanding this phrase. I mentioned the Leicester Codex earlier in the paper, and it is one of the manuscripts whose scribe did not abbreviate pneumati here, but it is not alone. Several manuscripts write the word in full, and thus orthographically support the ASV or NRSV reading. One manuscript with this reading is a 13th century manuscript containing the Old and New Testament in Greek and housed in the Österreichische Nationalbibliothek in Vienna. Its shelf number is Theol Greek 23, but more widely known as 218 in the Gregory Elan system. The scribe of this manuscript shows an interest in how the nomina sacra are applied. In 1 Timothy 3:16, pneumati is written in full. Then, in 1 Timothy 4:1a, pneuma is abbreviated. Now the Spirit expressly says. Before pneumasin is written in full in 1 Timothy 4:1b, devoting themselves to deceitful spirits. These alterations in how the nomina sacra were applied suggest to me that some scribes, without changing the words themselves, inserted their own theological understanding into the text via their choices to abbreviate. Spirits and the 7 spirits of Revelation. The third person of the Trinity is typically portrayed as singular. The plural forms of holy, hagios, and spirit, pneuma, are never co-located in the New Testament. As mentioned above, this led to scribes being more hesitant to use the nomina sacra for plural instances of spirit. It was the default for most scribes to abbreviate pneuma, but as an example, the New Testament critical apparatus developed by the Center for New Testament Textual Studies, or CNTTS, lists 33 individual manuscripts that use the nomina sacra at Matthew 1:18, which says, Mary was found to be in child from the Holy Spirit, so it's unanimous. The apparatus does not include a single manuscript that wrote Spirit in full. Compare this to Matthew 8:16, which speaks of Jesus casting out spirits plural. The CNTTS apparatus lists 21 manuscripts that did write pneuma in full, compared to 14 that abbreviated. And this trend continues throughout the New Testament. The book of Revelation challenged the scribal tendency to avoid using nomina sacra when pneuma is plural. 4 times the revelator speaks of these 7 spirits. Interpretations differ on whether these 7 spirits refer to 7 angels sent to the 7 churches in Asia or to the Holy Spirit. If my thesis is correct, that the scribal tradition in aggregate demonstrates the theological leanings of the copyists, then many scribes throughout history interpreted these passages as referring to the Holy Spirit. Other than the Leicester Codex, which abbreviates pneuma very rarely in Revelation, every manuscript listed in the CNTTS apparatus abbreviates these 4 instances of 7 spirits at least twice, and the vast majority abbreviate all 4 times. The truly interesting data are on the margins. 4 manuscripts do not abbreviate pneuma in 1:4, but then do abbreviate in the subsequent passages. Below you can see Codex Alexandrinus, a 5th century candat. It does not abbreviate in 1:4, but uses the nomina sacra in 3:1, which is pictured below, 4:5, and 5:6. It is an open question why a scribe would be inconsistent in this way. My personal theory is that the tendency to write the plural led the scribe to unthinkingly write the word in full the first time they encountered it in Revelation, and then in subsequent passages there was a realization that the plural should be considered divine, and it was abbreviated accordingly. So again, figures there you have both from Codex Alexandrinus, the first one, Revelation 1:4, it's spelled out in full, and then in Revelation 3:1, it's abbreviated. The ambiguous and sometimes perplexing information gleaned from manuscript copying sheds a window into the theological and hermeneutic presuppositions present throughout the history of the Church. In some instances, as in the case of the 7 spirits, the scribes weigh in on a problem that continues to generate discussion among commentators. According to the use of nomina sacra for these instances in Revelation, it is fair to assume the scribes believed these spirits to be a symbolic reference to the 3rd person of the Trinity. How am I doing on it? How much time do I have? 3 minutes? Okay, I'm going to jump to my conclusion then. Last page. This paper has offered a brief glimpse at the way in which a knowledge of manuscripts can affect our understanding of a passage. Sometimes the evidence reflects current exegetical debates, as with the 7 spirits of Revelation or the Christological hymn in 1 Timothy 3:16. Other times it brings unlikely interpretations to mind, as was the case in Acts 18:25, which I skipped over. This paper has focused on exegetical insights derived from the scribal use of nomina sacra for pneuma. But recall that there are approximately 15 words that were regularly abbreviated. There is much to be gained from an awareness of scribal practice. Unfortunately, it has been quite difficult to access this information in the past. The CNTTS apparatus, which I cited above, lists which manuscripts use nomina sacra and which do not. It is a convenient tool, yet it is inaccurate in places. The Editio Critica Major, or ECM, is a much more accurate resource, yet its first 3 published volumes did not include information regarding abbreviation. I am therefore very pleased that the newest volume of the ECM, covering the text of Revelation, includes data regarding the use of nomina sacra. The online version of this resource is still in progress, but I am anticipating working with it once it's finally done. It is my hope that this decision becomes a trend that will make this scribal decisions more accessible. Finally, how do the nomina sacra affect our understanding of the Trinity? I hope it is evident from this paper that many scribes considered their abbreviations carefully because they wanted to appropriately honor the Holy Spirit. By placing pen to parchment, by drawing the supralinear bar, the scribes engaged in a process of sanctification by abbreviation. In this way, the manuscripts themselves offer glimpses of the triune God.